Right, it is me back again. I'll put my screen over in the corner so you don't have to look at me. But I wanted to go over something I talked about in this three-part series that's coming on the audio only podcast. So make sure you listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast app, but just how chronic stress affects the whole you, specifically going into a series of cognitive health and how we need to work backwards and start with the northern point, our brain, and how we interpret stress and the role of the vagus nerve. How this roundabout way of H. pylori, not enough stomach acid, can relate to what Martha Carlin was talking about, Parkinson's symptoms and dopamine, and just how fascinating the body is and how we're all interconnected. So, as we focus on tips on the podcast here to create what we're saying metabolic harmony, that all the working parts as an orchestra players need to be working together, and how fascinating the vagus nerve is and how amazing the body is in protecting us when we are under stress, when we are being attacked. But the problem is we don't have a good filtration system, how to interpret what stress is really real, that we're in danger, or is it just something we're interpreting as paying bills that we don't have money for? So let's dive in. Trying to keep this short, but lots of notes. You can go read the blog note page here. I'll put in the show notes. Chronic stress increases cortisol, which suppresses your stomach acid, HCl, production by a roundabout way of chronic stress. So, how does that work? Is why I go down all these rabbit holes. I want to know something, but tell me how it's happening. Not just saying this is a result of chronic stress, but let's dive into the mechanism of action. Digestion is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system, which you probably know by now if you've been watching any of these videos, specifically the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, if you watch all the many videos I've done on that topic, stimulates gastric acid secretion. So you can assume what's going to happen if you are in the sympathetic nervous fight or flight system due to chronic stress activating that sympathetic system. When we have chronic stress fighting off from being attacked by a lion, our body shuts down the parasympathetic function. So now we are not having that signal to produce HCl, the stomach acid. So cortisol inhibits the parasympathetic nervous system rest and digest. Remember, we're talking chronic stress, chronically elevated high cortisol, and we can identify this on the Dutch test. So really important to test and not guess, but looking at what your cortisol levels are. And I'll just pop up my cortisol test I did a few years ago. But when I first got my adrenal exhaustion, you can see kind of my purpose here. This, I don't know if I have my original test because it was 2013. I started testing my Dutch test, but my metabolized cortisol was much better. But before, when I was first discovering that I had adrenal exhaustion, so to speak, the morning should be, you can see this ideal range is in between the low and the high daily free cortisol pattern. So waking, morning, and then we do afternoon measurement and then a nighttime measurement. Dutch test, I think, is great because you're doing what's free cortisol and metabolized cortisol. So it's different doing a urine test versus a saliva test, but there are tests that Dutch offers that you do both. So when I'm speaking of elevated cortisol, we're going above that range that's ideal. So if we look at HP progression pictures, you can see how it progresses. If we look at this image, so we have the different phases of cortisol being normal, and then it's elevated, where we just showed you on here. So we go back to elevation, it's probably above or at top of this high end, trending higher. And then if you were me, you find you're kind of dropping down. And when I discovered I had problems, which is my mission, help you not get here to know, okay, acute distress, I was over here, compensatory phase, somewhere on this side of the bell curve. So my cortisol sum was extremely low. So when I'm talking to you in these series of videos about testing and not guessing, we're going to go into H. pylori, looking at a GI map where we're looking at your pathogens, looking at H. pylori and these different factors, virulence factor, and then you'll see on a GI map all these other bacteria markers, and then opportunistic overgrowth microbes, a sample report. And so you get an idea of candida, yeast overgrowth, and we want to also do an organic acids test to get a good picture. But as an FDN practitioner, we would be looking at, where are you on this HP axis progression? What does your Dutch test say? What does your GI map say? And then, or if you do organic acids test, and really see what is a result of maybe living life as a race, right? So maybe you're doing too much of everything. So I think it's important to look at, looking at organic acids, you get more of a mold markers, the yeast fungal markers, looking at the bacteria markers, Clostridia oxalate. So the reason I just wanted to touch on this is when I'm talking today regarding H. pylori, that we're getting to, is important to test and not guess, but really look at the whole picture. Is it elevated? Do I have signs of poor digestion? Looking at all this. So anyways, let's head over to my main focus is how chronic stress, if it's elevated over so long, remember, I didn't even know this was happening. I was over on the other side by the time I had problems. So chronic stress reduces gastrin production. Chronic stress suppresses histamine pathway. So histamine stimulates H2 receptors in the stomach lining to increase HCl production. So if you're chronically stressed and you have, remember, well, let's go back to this picture, elevated cortisol, you are going to have less, you're dampening the histamine signaling, so you have reduction in acid secretion. So remember, signals receptors in the stomach lining to increase HCl production. We also have increased prostaglandin production. So chronic stress triggers the release of cortisol in general, triggers release of prostaglandins, which help protect the stomach lining, but inhibit secretion to reduce irritation. So over time, this can lead to, if this is chronically happening, lower stomach acid. So Goldilocks effect. The body has this homeostasis, the right amount. Number 5, reduction of blood flow to the digestive tract. Chronic stress. During stress, the body diverts blood flow away from the digestive tract to prioritize the muscles and the brain. So you can respond to that threat, that emergency. Less blood flow means fewer resources for everything as acid production and slowing digestion. So what happens from chronic stress on low stomach acid? Well, what we're talking about is getting to this H. pylori. H. pylori overgrowth as it thrives in low acid environments. Poor digestion of proteins. And if your protein you ate just sitting there and it's not moving south, we can have bloating, gas, malabsorption. So remember, anything of slower motility, because your food's just sitting there, carbs, fat, protein aren't moving down the digestive pathway. The longer they sit there, the more problems you're going to have. Fermentation, nutrient deficiencies. If we have low stomach acid, we're not able to digest the food and we're not going to get those nutrients that we need, B12, iron, zinc, magnesium, because they require an acidic environment for absorption. So really important part of the health investigation that we do as FDN practitioners, looking at the whole picture and treating the whole person. So a holistic approach, not just giving you B12 because your new micronutrient panel says you have low B12. Iron shows up low in your blood tests, magnesium. We need to look at the why, or else you're just putting a Band-Aid on, you're not solving the problem, even though it might help you for a little bit, but it's still going to be low nutrients if we're not fixing the problem, right? It's like Dr. Oh, what's her name? Dutch test, Dr. Carey. always talks about Dr. Carrie Jones has a great analogy of the bathtub and the leaky bathtub. So we need to fix the problem and not keep having this happen. So how does stomach support stomach acid under stress? This is why I keep talking about the vagus nerve. If you have chronic stress issues, anxiety, all sorts of different symptoms of poor vagus nerve as digestion issues, stimulate the vagus nerve, deep breathing, meditation, chewing food thoroughly. Vagus nerve disruption, listen to my podcast with Amy at Nirvana Life and learn about the vagal nerve stimulation that you can do for 10 minutes while you're stretching at night. Digestive bitters, help stimulate natural stomach acid or stimulate natural acid production. Just having some bitters or some apple cider vinegar, put in some sparkling water. I do that often just for something different. Betaine HCl supplementation can support low stomach acids. Really important. You do not want to supplement if you have H. pylori. So we need to test on something as this GI map to know, do I have H. pylori, and looking at different signs and symptoms of, yeah, we've got something going on. And so we've got to look at H. pylori, as this says in our reports from the GI map guide. Recent studies have shown that nearly 50% of the world's population may have H. pylori, and many carriers are asymptomatic. H. pylori is known to cause Rolls ulcers, chronic gastritis, stomach cancer, early phases of colonization, may experience low stomach acid, followed by change of hyperaciduria. Over time, H. pylori strain, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, we want to test and not guess if you're high and know that, are you having problems with H. pylori? So, and then genetics, so you can look at that. That's our little summary on our test results. So where are you on this HPA progression? Reduce chronic stress, heart rate variability, adaptogens, parasympathetic activation, vagus nerve stimulation. So if you head over to Nirvana Life and look at the vagus nerve stimulation, that's what I've been doing in the evening. All right. H. pylori. What is it? How do we work on it? So chronic stress increases H. pylori growth. So reduction in our stomach acid, we just went over, because chronic stress increases cortisol. Increasing cortisol suppresses stomach acid production because we're in that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. H. pylori thrives in low stomach environments, and stress, chronic stress, makes it easier for H. pylori to colonize in the stomach. If you have low stomach acid, you need stomach acid to kill off pathogens, increases your susceptibility to H. pylori function if you don't have enough stomach acid. So it's that wash of killing off that acidic environment to kill off the bad guys so they don't enter into your small intestine, which is the next part of order of operations in digestion. If we have chronic stress going on, chronic stress increases mucosal damage, reduces the SIG-A production, secretory IgA. This makes the gut wall lining more vulnerable to infections as H. pylori. Again, high cortisol, not the right amount. Homeostasis, we have this right amount. But if we have excessive, above where you need it, so going back to the other chart, if it's above where it's supposed to be, remember we need cortisol higher in the morning, lower later in the day. Stress activates HPA axis system, increases inflammation, intestinal permeability, leaky gut, which can worsen H. pylori infections. Cytokine release from stress can enhance H. pylori. So chronic stress impacts all this. Our defense mechanisms are down. So H. pylori worsens the effects of chronic stress. So now we're adding that to that beaker of stress. H. pylori is now contributing to the chronic stress. So we're having that domino effect, and it stimulates the vagus nerve. This signals the body to reinforcing a stress response. So now we have an infection. We have these hidden sources of chronic stress. Remember, hidden in our FDN world means hidden sources of chronic stress hormones, immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy system, and your nervous system. Neurotransmitter disruption. This is where I was getting to when I was researching this. H. pylori and dopamine. How is this impacted to cognitive decline and Parkinson's that this all came from? The discussion of led me down this pathway. H. pylori affects dopamine and serotonin metabolism, and this increases stress-related mood disorders as anxiety and depression and interferes with tryptophan metabolism, leading to lower serotonin availability. And then we already went over nutrient malabsorption as H. pylori reduces absorption of B12, magnesium, zinc, and iron, nutrients that are needed for stress regulation, neurotransmitter balance, adrenal function. So this can make you more prone to fatigue, brain fog, anxiety, because we're not getting the nutrients we need to deal with stress. All right, so what do? We need to test and not guess. We can use digestive bitters, apple cider vinegar, but betaine HCl I would not take unless you know for sure you don't have elevated H. pylori. Now, supporting gut health, probiotics. We talked to William Davis, Dr. Davis, a few times, and Martha Carlin of BiotiQuest using their sugar shift, or using Dr. Davis's L-Reuteri. They have the Gut to Glow program. I'm using their capsules and making yogurt, or I do BiotiQuest sugar shift and use that half a cup every day. You also want to increase butyrate production. So when we're doing GI map tests, we can look at, do we have the right short chain fatty acid production? And I don't know if the GI map has it on there actually, but we can get this digestion intestinal markers here. Maybe we need additional source, different labs have more short chain fatty acids as Genova Diagnostics. This is Diagnostic Solutions Lab. And look at, do we have any digestive issues here? Now, you can, of course, manage stress. We talk about every time, but that's a big part of digestion issues and this low stomach acid because of the vagus nerve, because of chronic stress, because we're in sympathetic dominance. So get that whole connection, work backwards. Don't just treat the problems. You need to solve why is it happening. So dive in a little deeper. Now, how do you get rid of H. pylori? Don't do it on your own. Test with the right functional lab test and correlate the data. Your practitioner, work with FDN practitioner, myself, that we investigate and then look at what is best for you. I like Matula tea. It's tea bag you drink morning and evening for a month. And we just, before you do any of these protocols to eradicate any bacteria, pathogen, dysbiosis, we need to make sure the liver is functioning optimal level first. And you do a drainage pathways program to make sure everything's working. So baking soda test is something I just did and I failed. I've always struggled with poor stomach acid and probably need to test for H. pylori again, but you can look online for the baking soda challenge. I showed it on my Instagram. So make sure you head to Instagram and see my post there and follow me on Coach Debbie Potts. So how is this related to cognitive decline? Let's go into this deeper. I think it's important to know because if you're focused on your future self, we need to do everything we can now at age 50 and start working on it. So H. pylori can interfere, as we talked about dopamine, with dopa absorption. The precursor to dopamine is L-dopa. This is an issue when Parkinson's patients take a medication who rely on L-dopa. So chronic H. pylori infection can induce neuroinflammation, and this impacts the dopamine production and signaling. So H. pylori interferes with L-dopa absorption. So if you're taking L-dopa medication to help increase, well, you've got some problems. So H. pylori may trigger immune responses that react with dopamine producing neurons, leading to neurodegeneration. I am not an expert in any of this. I'm just sharing my research, my rabbit hole. All right, so H. pylori and Parkinson's, studies show that higher prevalence of H. pylori infection in Parkinson's patients. Eradication of H. pylori has been shown to improve motor symptoms of help with that dopamine because you're getting the L-DOPA response. So remember, L-DOPA, precursor dopamine, and H. pylori interferes with that L-DOPA absorption to make dopamine. So again, we work backwards. We dive in, go layer by layer. H. pylori produces what we talked a lot about lately, LPS, lipopolysaccharides. Martha Carlin talked about this, and Dr. William Davis. This is a neurotoxin. This is really area I want to share more about because we need to create awareness of how to avoid excessive lipopolysaccharides and not have leaky gut, that these LPSs, endotoxins, are seeping out of, they cross the borderline. Remember, Mexico to US, the borderline's not so strong and they can just walk right through. We need to seal the borderline so no one escapes and crosses the borderline without checking with the management, with the head honchos. Okay, so just to go over this again, because the next one's the big one. H. pylori produces LPS and ammonia, which promote neuroinflammation, oxidative stress, damaging the dopamine neurons. Next, what I keep coming back to, my new favorite topic, the vagus nerve pathway. H. pylori can trigger gut inflammation and alter gut microbiota. If that happens, now we're sending pro-inflammatory signals via the vagus nerve to the brain, contributing to Parkinson's disease-like symptoms. So remember, work backwards. How do we get H. pylori? Now you know how to test and not guess if you have it or not, if it's excessive. And are you having symptoms of it? But H. pylori triggering gut inflammation, alter microbiome. Now you've got these pro-inflammatory. It's just crazy. And traditional medicine is probably never looking at this. Nothing that they're great at a lot of things, but this is not something traditional medicine doctors would look into. H. pylori and cognitive decline. How's this working? H. pylori, we just went over, disrupts the gut microbiome. We talked about short chain fatty acid production as butyrate supports brain health. So if we don't have enough short chain fatty acid production, this can support our brain health, the gut brain axis. H. pylori reduces stomach acid, as we went over in the beginning. This impacts our nutrient absorption, as we're talking B12 here. B12 is crucial for cognitive function and the myelin sheath. So that neurons have this covering, and B12, you need B12. Systemic inflammation and oxidative stress. Systemic inflammation. How is that even happening, right? So work your way backwards. How do you get systemic inflammation? Starts from the gut. Leaky gut, now systemic inflammation. Chronic infection increases pro-inflammatory cytokines, and this is linked to cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, and neurodegeneration. So important if you're concerned about your future self. I'm looking at my mom's friends and people she knows. So many people are having Parkinson's. I have friends, parents. My friend lost her mom to Parkinson's. My husband lost his mom to Parkinson's a few years ago, or been over 8 years ago. And I'm hearing more and more stories. So I think we have to take ownership of our health. Our generation knows how to do that. If we have the right tools in place, we can be these health optimizers to avoid going through this as much as we can, right? So just remember this picture. I have lots of images from Dr. Jockers because he's so great at educating us. Stomach acid, it sterilizes a food. I think that's why the book or the quote is why dogs don't get sick. They have that enough acidity in their stomach to kill off the bacteria, pathogens. Sterilizes food, protein digestion, activating pepsin, activating intrinsic factor, so get the B12, stimulating delivery of bile and enzymes, closing the sphincter, the flap from the small intestine to the small intestine, and pyloric sphincter. So we've got sphincter is a little flap at the top of the stomach and the bottom of it. And we have to make sure those trap doors close so we don't have backflow. All right, so solutions, test and not guess, work with a practitioner. So I'm not going to go over this. This is what you need to look at with a practitioner. But make sure you have B12, folate, magnesium, omega-3, help support dopamine and cognitive function. Make sure you support beneficial bacteria. So the good bacteria increase butyrate production, get the right fibers, prebiotics to support the bacteria. So we want the good bacteria that make short chain fatty acids. And you can look at that online. Actually, you should look that up. So if you could look online, short chain fatty acids, or what do you say? Good bacteria that produce short chain fatty acid. List of bacteria species. That's what you want to look up. So then you can look up, all right, what are the short chain fatty acids that I need to look for when I do my GI map test or stool test to figure out which one. So then you can look up the list somewhere in here, which show you what ones you need. Which bacteria. So micro development, short chain fatty acids, different stages in life. That's a cool picture. So you can look at adult, elderly, and which bacteria. We'll have to save this. See, that's how you go here. Save. So increase in Firmicutes and Bacteroides, increases level of propionate and butyrate, remains stable over time. What happens when we're older? Decrease in the production of propionate and butyrate, decrease in microbial diversity, increase in proteobacteria. So what do we need to do to improve our short chain fatty acid production? Something you need to work with a practitioner. All right, so we need to look at what to do. So if you have high cortisol, low cortisol, again, get a Dutch test along with your GI test and your food sensitivity test on organic acids, and a mineral test would be good, heavy metals, depending on your budget, and figure out what is best for you. So do you have high or low? So test and not guess, but really how to regulate your cortisol to restore each cell production. Let's work on the lifestyle habits. You can't out supplement, take all this stuff if you're not managing your stress with deep breathing, as box breathing, inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, repeat 5 meals. So symptoms if you have high cortisol, here you go. Wired but tired, anxious, irritable, trouble falling asleep, increase in belly fat, and you have acid reflux, often due to not enough stomach acid despite of too much acid. So it's not about too much acid that all these people prescribe the wrong drugs. It's a huge problem. And I've heard like millions of people are prescribed antacids. That's not the problem. It's the opposite. Regulate cortisol to restore each cell production, restore stomach acid naturally with a apple cider vinegar, digestive bitters, lemon water, ginger tea. It's Meyer lemon season here, so I'm getting all the lemons from the neighbors that I can, and when they put them out in a bucket in front of their driveways, my favorite way to grab those fresh Meyer's lemons, but stimulate digestion, lowers inflammation with the ginger tea. Zinc, test your minerals, make sure you're not too much fit. Minerals all have to be balanced, metabolic harmony. Support your gut lining. If you have acid reflux, focus on healing the gut first and not do betaine HCl. And there's solutions there working with your practitioner. And you can get stuff on full script, but don't just start to experiment. Try this, try that. What we do as FDN practitioners is to get you out of that cycle of trial and error. Don't use betaine HCl, hydrochloric acid, unless you know you are cleared to go. Where's my test? If you're cleared on the GI map test, or you're good. So we can look at your levels on your H.Pylori if it's not high. Okay. So don't just start supplementing yourself. Do not treat yourself. If you have low cortisol, burnout stage, adrenal fatigue, remember we're over here. This is where I was. I missed out on here. I didn't know I was there. So I went over to here without even having any awareness. I thought I was just invincible. So brain fog, fatigue, low blood pressure, dizziness, slow digestion, bloating, low morning energy, increased food intolerances. Remember when you do the Dutch test and you're low, you're below level. So see how afternoon, I'll probably get tired. That's probably why I need to exercise and do something in the afternoon, because I just need to pick me up because I'm not producing enough cortisol. So I'm kind of sluggish. So it's a Goldilocks effect, not too high, not too low. and you want to have more in the morning. So what we do is look at metabolized cortisol versus your free cortisol, looking at patterns and where you have disruption or imbalances. And then we can see actually your estrogens, your hormones, and then you can see your DHA, testosterone. I need to get tested again, but DHA would be a good supplement for me, support the rest of my hormones. And then here, my estrogens, this was 5 years ago. So this is why I've been low estrogen. And that's why you want to check. Now, my blood work said I was high estrogen recently, but I think I have more estrogen dominance because I have liver congestion. So again, test and not guess, and work with a practitioner. All right. Rebuilding energy, morning light exposure, 10, 15 minutes outside. Don't wear sunglasses. I saw these people when I was running in the morning in Palm Desert last few days in my mom's neighborhood. And all these people are not all. There's a few people out there at 6:30 in the morning going for a walk, and they have sunglasses on when the sun's coming up. Don't wear your sunglasses. You're not going to get, sun's not going to burn your eyes. It's good to reset that circadian rhythm, unless you're really sensitive for some reason. I don't know why. But electrolytes, I've been trying different mineral drops, vitamin C. There's adrenal cocktail from Jigsaw Health. There's different things on my full script you can get. Buoy, BUOY is my new electrolyte drops I do during the day without sweetener. They don't have any sugar like other companies are doing. Or you can add some Celtic sea salt, lemon water in the morning, vitamin C, and then licorice root is something you need to get with your practitioner, figure out if you need. But apple cider vinegar, digestive bitters, you can find bitters, not burgers, but bitters on my full script you can get for a great price. Apple cider vinegar you can get at Costco. Has the white stuff at the bottom. Warm bone broth, ginger tea, it's great for digestion. Protein, healthy fats. We talk about this all the time. Some people need to eat first thing in the morning to support cortisol if they have low cortisol. So you might need to eat something if you're really low on your cortisol patterns. So this chart is actually good. So stress, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, tells your adrenal gland. So you got this whole sequence. You want to see your melatonin in relationship to your cortisol, cortisone inactive to cortisol active, and your metabolized, how much cortisol, your total production during the day versus what you're using. So this is why a Dutch test is so helpful, daily free cortisone. So inactive, and what is available is free. And this is different patterns. Sometimes this could be free, the metabolized cortisol, this could be really high and this could be really low, or they could be in the same. So I'm pretty low available cortisol. So this would be showing I'm still really low. And then also just show you on the Dutch test, they have some newer markers since my test, but you get the metabolite. So this is why it's helpful to do the Dutch and the GI test, see where you are in this HPA progression, see if you have some issues and low nutrients. And if you have the need to high cortisol or low cortisol, the protocols will be different. So if you have high, focus on stress reduction, gut healing, gradual stomach acid support, low cortisol, adrenal recovery, nutrient depletion, stomach acid stimulation when we're speaking of stomach acid. Okay, so plans for high cortisol, regulation, the box breathing we talked about, restore stomach acid naturally, and plan for low cortisol. We already went over that. I have that twice. If you have questions, let me know, but I think it's important to look at your tests. Dutch test, see where you are in that progression chart, getting your GI stool test to see what bacteria overgrowth you have, your Akkermansia, what is going on, Bacteroides versus Firmicutes, how is your short chain fatty acid production? Where are you, what bacteria are you making enough of? Are you developing, or what stage of life are you in? So are you needing to change? If we could get people older to test, this would be amazing, wouldn't it? So let me know if you have questions. Head over to debbiepotts.net and we can talk about how you can get to be your best self as you age. So thanks for listening, and thanks for being on a mission. Be fit and healthy from the inside out.